You are now listening to the More Than an Admin podcast with Mallory Rothstein. For more, visit morethananadmin.com. And if you haven't already, make sure you go subscribe to this podcast. Thank you and enjoy this episode. What's up, More Than an Admin community? I hope everyone listening is doing well. It has been a while since I've dropped a podcast episode, but we are finally back after a roller coaster last year. But before we really get into this episode, I want to say happy 70th anniversary to my grandparents because it was just their anniversary on Halloween and they are a huge inspiration to me. They played a big role in why I moved to St. Pete, and I'm hoping in this next chapter of my life I can spend even more quality time with them. I know they might be listening, so love y'all and see you soon to celebrate your 90th and 92nd birthdays. Now, what is this next chapter I'm talking about? If you didn't already see via LinkedIn, after 7 years, I am finally leaving Google on January 2nd, which is still a couple of months away, but with the holidays coming up, we all know it's going to go by fast. I'm really excited to take this big leap of crazy faith to fulfill what I believe God is calling me to do next. I'll be in New York on January 2nd, so the Google New York City office is where I'll be spending my last day and return my badge and everything else. This is going to be a full circle moment for me because before I moved to California to take the job at Google, I was living in New York City, and that office was the first one I've ever visited, but I did so as a guest. It's going to be an emotional moment, and whoever I do dinner with on the 2nd better be ready to celebrate. The Google New York City campus has always been my favorite Google one. One of my favorite all-time views is from the 9th Ave building on the 14th floor balcony. Every time I go to that office, I make sure I go there, especially when it's warm out, and I'll work outside from there, even if it's just 5 minutes. If you ever get a chance to go to that office, try to have whoever's hosting you take you to that spot because I promise the view is worth it and it is breathtaking. So to keep my ADHD brain focused and not word vomit, which some of y'all know I could totally do, my goal for this episode is to simply give you answers to some of the questions you most likely are wondering and give you a glimpse into what is coming next. Can't share everything just yet, but hopefully this will be a good start. The first question I bet you're wondering is, why leave Google and why now? For those who might not know my entire story, I've always been upfront and clear with everyone who I worked with from the beginning that Google wasn't my final destination. As crazy as it might sound, I always saw Google as a stepping stone. This is regardless if I had stayed as an administrative business partner or switched roles. During my freshman year of college, after I decided I didn't want to be a doctor anymore when I failed my first chemistry test, I happened to pick up at Barnes & Noble's Blake Mycosky's book, Start Something That Matters. This book is about social entrepreneurship and Blake's story on how he founded his company, Tom's. It taught me that you can have fun, make profit, and still do good in the world. This book completely changed my mindset and entire trajectory of my life. This is because since reading it, I knew I wanted to be the founder of any kind of social enterprise or movement that would make a positive difference in many people's lives. In 2013, I even got Start Something That Matters tattooed on my ribcage. If anyone knows Blake or his assistant, I'm just saying, hook a girl up. In all seriousness, I would just love to one day thank him and his team because I wouldn't be where I am today had I not read that book. When I took my first assistant role after college, I took it with the intention of learning from the CEO I was supporting and trusted that one day I would leverage everything I've learned and my network to build something of my own. Little did I know God's plan for me and how much I'd fall in love with the assistant role, which is why I've stayed in it much longer than I ever thought I really would. I learned how God will place you in different positions and you must make the most of that position, not focus on what position you don't have yet. Because if He puts you in that position, you are meant to have influence there. It's up to you to decide how influential you will be. You can have zero influence or you could have limitless influence. You decide. Looking back, I realized that God was placing me in different positions in my life to prepare and lead me to leading more than an admin, which hopefully you all know is about influencing how the world views administrative professionals, and launching Learn What Matters, which right now is a scholarship program at my high school, both of which have become part of my life's purpose and influenced my decision in leaving. Now I'll share more specifically 3 of the biggest reasons why I decided to leave. Remember, there are more reasons, but for now, here are the top 3. The first reason is that I couldn't find a way to balance my core role as an admin, leading Google's More Than an Admin chapter, building my external More Than an Admin movement, building Learn What Matters, going to sleep at a normal hour, and having any kind of personal life with a real chance of finding a life partner. I've always been one to go nonstop and barely sleep, but over the last 2 years, my lack of sleep become much more of a serious problem. My midnight or 1 a.m. bedtimes turned into 6 a.m. bedtimes, which I was doing nearly every single day, and I was pulling much more frequent all-nighters. I know my West Coast friends will vouch for me because I'm not exaggerating, because they often call or text me at super late at night and they'll share that I'm always still awake. Because of having such a packed schedule and barely sleeping, that I realized that if I didn't make a big change, that I was going to end up in a hospital bed or in a funeral home. Every single day, I thank God for continuing to keep me alive because I really don't know how I am. And I thank God that I've had the willpower to never engage in drugs or alcohol or painkillers or caffeine to keep me awake, like many successful people do. Apparently, I run on purpose, passion, and God's will. Maybe a Starbucks here or there too. But in all seriousness, when I was evaluating my life, I knew something had to give if I wanted a chance at sleeping at a normal hour again. And as much as I have enjoyed being an admin at Google, I really felt God was telling me that it was finally time to close this chapter if I wanted to live the life that I had dreamed of for myself, and that I needed to sacrifice temporary discomfort for long-term success. Google makes it so tough to leave because of all the opportunities and perks and benefits and network, which you'll often hear people call the golden handcuffs. I can't stress enough how difficult it was to not only make this decision, but actually execute it. Now, on to the second reason, which is that being remote was not my ideal working situation, and I didn't think that I could be the best admin that I could be so far away from my leaders and team. I can't speak for everyone else who is remote, but for me, it's been incredibly tough to be a remote admin at Google. Unless your leaders and team are also remote or you live in the same state as them where you could theoretically commute in if needed, I don't think it's sustainable to be a great admin, again, at least for me. I think I probably was a good admin over the last couple of years, but not the greatest. And being on the East Coast, supporting all leaders and teams on the West Coast just became too much, especially because I live 4 hours away from the closest Google office. I started to feel a lot more disconnected from Google as a whole and didn't like that I had to constantly rely on people in the office to help me at times since I wasn't always there. Even though I always tried to make it up to people, I just felt really guilty always having to ask people to pick up catering or to help me with a guest that was visiting one of my executives. And I felt this constant need to prove my value since it's not as easy for people to see it when we're all in person together. Now, I acknowledge I did this to myself because I moved specifically to St. Pete knowing there was no Google office nearby. Because my original plan when moving was to leave Google soon after. But due to a very long string of family and friend weddings, I simply couldn't afford to leave when I originally planned. It's funny to look back now because my life was a serious roller coaster ride during the last year to the point I was crying, asking God, why are you doing all this to me as I'm really trying to start a new chapter? What is the message you're trying to give me? But then I remembered this memory from the day I left California when I prayed to God to make my life so uncomfortable and difficult that it would give me the courage to leave. Because I knew I'd continue to stay and stay and stay. Because, like I mentioned before, I did enjoy my job. And there are these golden handcuffs, as I said before, that make it so tough that I needed life to make it so obvious to me if it was the right move to make a big leap. Well, let me tell all my fellow believers, not believers, believers, some advice. Be very careful what you pray for because God might over deliver on his promises. He definitely over delivered on mine. And since I've left California, I've never been through so many challenges and obstacles, not just one, but every aspect of my life. And I definitely learned my lesson here. Working remote began to impact my ability to feel settled in Florida because first, I work Pacific time hours, so I'm on until at least 8 or 9 p.m., which is late for most people to hang out. And then I've always felt the need to fly to California to see people in person, even if Google wasn't paying for my travel, since technically I didn't need to be there but wanted to because of my own preferences. And shout out to one of my best friends, Justine, because truly, if it wasn't for her, I don't know what I would have done because she's always let me stay with her, even for months over the last 2 years, so I can save myself or Google money on hotel costs. And let me be very clear on this before I transition to the next reason. Working remote became tough based on who I am and my preferences and my definition of what it means to be a great admin, not because of any performance issues raised or my leaders or admin team being difficult to work with remotely. I'm actually so grateful to all of them and Google as a whole for supporting me to be able to work remote. They could have let me go at any time since February 2021, but chose not to. I'm not one to think it's a right to work remotely, and I don't take it for granted that I was given a privilege that many others don't even have an option to choose from. And just to quickly add, there have also been many positive sides of working remotely, which have included my ability to cook more, being closer to my family, having no commute time, and having no interruptions from people coming up to my desk constantly, which if you're an assistant, you know that often happens. But just because there are positives, it doesn't mean they outweigh the trade-offs, at least for me. Now on to the third reason I'm leaving. is that once I was able to get Google to release the copyright and IP for More Than an Admin, I felt it was best to walk away if I wanted More Than an Admin to become the brand and movement that I had originally envisioned it to be. This is because also Google's employment contract and code of conduct has specific rules and restrictions impacting an employee's ability to have complete ownership, creative control, and financial freedom of the work that they do outside of their core role, especially if they create something from scratch. You need to get certain approvals from different internal teams. This is not just the case for Google, but for most businesses out there. So if you take anything from this podcast, please remember that you should read every single line of everything you sign when joining a company. I know that there are others who have big social media accounts or successful side hustles who either have no idea that they're going against company policy or they choose to risk it because they don't think Google's legal, people ops, and PR teams will ever care. But I had someone really put things in perspective for me when they advised that I should get approval before building something amazing that has the ability to go viral, because you don't want to find out after all the time, money, and energy you put into building something that's going to all be wasted if Google ever did try to get ownership or sue you for it based on the contract that you do sign. And I'm not saying that Google will do this. And I'm not even saying it's bad that they do this because they're protecting their brand. And as I build More Than an Admin and I hire employees, I'm sure I'm going to have them sign similar contracts too. I just wanted there to be zero chance of me ever having Google being upset with me or me having to deal with legal stuff, which is why earlier this year I actually put myself through their formal review process, which even though I got the approvals for, that process was stressful and I don't want to have to continue to go through all these internal teams every time I want to speak anywhere, launch anything, or publish something new, including this podcast. I certainly don't want to have to potentially ever censor myself. So I'm choosing to leave to have full ownership, creative control, and financial freedom without the stress. Those are my top 3 for now. Now on to the timing of my decision, which was the most difficult part of the process. While I had plans to leave Google since July 2020, it wasn't until early 2023 that I started developing a legit plan. It began with me getting very real with myself on what financial milestones I needed to hit and writing out all the ways I could freelance or work part-time if I needed to do once I left. Since I don't have a partner I can rely on for healthcare or a rich family to provide me with any kind of safety net, I really had to be strategic and intentional with saving and deciding on an end date. I thought I'd announce in May earlier this year that I'd be leaving in July. But then my team was going through so many different team changes that I wanted to make sure things were settled before I left. I care a lot about loyalty, and my manager and her manager have been very loyal to me over my entire career at Google, so I wanted to return the favor and do what I believed was the right thing by staying a little bit longer. This ended up giving me an opportunity from May to September to go on an epic adventure, driving from Florida all the way to Canada, stopping along the way to about 10 different Google offices. Then I went on the West Coast from California to Washington. I had so much fun getting to meet many people I've known for years but never got to meet face to face, and getting to see so many cool features of different Google offices. I definitely think this company has the best real estate and workplace services team ever. I cannot wait to share some of the photos on LinkedIn from this trip, so be on the lookout there. Then at the end of August, I finally had a conversation with my manager about leaving, and we agreed on January 2nd. The next question you might be wondering is, why did you give so much notice and want to announce so early? For one, I hate holding on to my own secrets because I hold on to way too many other people's secrets, which is why I tend in general to be an open book. It became way too hard for me to operate without anxiety, knowing that my intention was to leave by 2024, but everyone else not knowing this. If anyone would ask me about my plans at More Than an Admin or staying in Florida, I didn't like that because sometimes I had to lie or be coy, and that's really not like me. This is why once I told my manager, I asked for it to be announced as soon as possible. When I was at Henry Schein before Google, I gave 2 months notice, so that this timing is pretty on brand for me. The more obvious reason to giving so much notice is to give my leadership and admin teams enough time to plan a thoughtful transition. But the more selfish reason is that this timeline gives me enough time to transition everything off, also having time to catch up with as many people as possible before the holidays roll around. If I only gave 2 to 4 weeks notice, I'd be completely overwhelmed. Leaving Google logistically is a serious endeavor, especially when you're entangled in a lot of things across the company, not just with your core team. I really don't know how anyone at Google, especially admins, can only give 2 to 4 weeks notice, but power to you if you can handle it, because I could certainly not. The third question you might be wondering is your team opening up an external role that I can apply for? As of now, the short and sweet answer is that there's not an external posting, but if anything changes, I will share that link on LinkedIn. The next question, which I think everyone mostly cares about, is where are you going and what are you doing next? I love and hate when people ask me this because on one hand, I'm so excited for the future, But on the other hand, I'm still figuring out what that future is going to be. First, I'm leaving Google and taking a complete break from the corporate world. My first month post Google will be teaching myself the art of relaxing, as many people call it, and gifting myself time to just self reflect and process everything I've been through in the last decade of my life. My life has been a roller coaster ride with some amazing highs, but also some terrible lows. I'm taking January to fully invest in myself because I know the next chapter of my life is going to require me to be at my best physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, and emotionally. Having ADHD, as I mentioned before, has been one of my greatest superpowers, but also one of my biggest challenges. And I'm looking forward to having the time to really figure out a way to balance everything and get my mind to stop racing for what it feels like it races 100 miles an hour 24/7. Some of you know that my book was supposed to come out earlier this year, but many of you don't also know that the self-publishing company I was working with, Scribe Media, went bankrupt and I lost $12,000 and have no book published. It caused me to really pause, and thankfully my best friend Dawn was there to support me during this, sharing that she thinks I have a much more powerful book within me that once I close this chapter at Google. So a good portion of January will also be spent rewriting that book with a fresh mindset. When I look back on many moments of my life now, I look at them way differently than when I was going through them. So I really think giving myself the time, the space, and silence in January to self-reflect will help me be able to share all the stories and content I want to eventually share with y'all in a much better way. I've also booked myself a cruise for January with 3 of my cousins, leaving out of Puerto Rico. I've never been on a cruise before. I visited the Caribbean, so I'm excited to experience both for the first time. I'm also a tad nervous because I have no idea if I'll get seasick. And Titanic was my favorite movie growing up, but I've always been one to venture out of my comfort zone. So this is just another opportunity to do that. If you've ever been on a cruise, especially a Virgin Voyages one, please DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn to give me some best tips and recommendations. I'll take anything I can get. This is going to be the first time in my life and my first vacation where I can truly turn off my cell phone without feeling the need to constantly check in or get those post-vacation scaries, so I cannot wait. But then what? After my little break, I want to get more connected with the local St. Pete and Tampa communities because I've decided to fully commit to living in Florida for at least the foreseeable future. I'm also going to be reading the Bible from cover to cover and getting more planted in a local church. I want to spend more quality time with my family and friends. I'm also going to, like I said, be working on publishing my first book. And now I'm debating if I even want to work with any kind of publisher anymore. So again, if you have any tips, please send them my way. I hope to also become an amazing cook and invest more in my kitchenware. I actually love to cook and way prefer to eat in versus going out because restaurant food these days has become way too salty, sweet, or greasy for me since I eat mostly at home and I'm very healthy. And I love to juice and use my blender too, so we're going to be leveling up that up even more in 2024. I'm going to work on building more than an admin and learn what matters, which I believe are God's purpose for me. I put Learn What Matters completely aside in recent years since the pandemic because I had no time to dedicate to it. Once I came up with the idea for More Than an Admin, but this was my first baby in 2017, and I want to finally expand my high school scholarship program to be able to impact more students. Lastly, I'm going to prioritize dating, hoping to find a life partner to build my own family with. So if you know any amazing single Christian men in Florida out there, help a girl out. Anyway, this is my loose game plan for now, but I'm open to whatever, wherever, whoever God leads me to in this next chapter. It's the first time in my life where I'm not putting any kind of pressure on myself, especially when it comes to timelines. I'm running my own race at my own pace. Every time I've been set on a plan, God surprises me, so I'm waiting to see what doors He opens up for me next. My life's always been an adventure, and I'm sure it won't stop now. The next question I bet you're wondering is, what's next for More Than an Admin and this podcast? This is by far the hardest question for me to answer because, again, I only have a loose game plan with no firm timelines. I'm also, for the first time, not sharing all the details of any plans I have with anyone besides God. It's only God and I right now who knows the full scope of my long-term vision for what I believe More Than an Admin is meant to be. I'm trying to learn from past mistakes, and I feel like God is telling me that if I want different results, I need to do things differently, which is why I'm keeping my mouth shut for once. I want to first close this Google chapter fully before I start publicly announcing or launching anything new besides this podcast. What I can share, though, is that More Than an Admin is still going to be about influencing how the world views administrative professionals. And More Than an Admin will become one of the most well-known, impactful, inspirational, thought-provoking brands and movements for not only administrative professionals, but rather for everyone around the world. And mark my words, it's happening. In terms of this podcast, we'll definitely come back consistently with more amazing guests in the new year. Right now, I'm looking for a podcast editor and touring different podcast studios so that the sounds and production quality will be much higher, because I know that it hasn't been best in the past. I've had to re-record this episode literally at least 20 times. Probably even more. I do not know why the sound is having issues. I've tried everything. I have invested in very expensive mics and headphones, so I don't know what the problem is. So now I got to bring in the big guns. Since the beginning, I've always said that I'm just starting out, knowing very little about podcasting and any kind of editing and any kind of sound audio engineering. Everyone just has to start somewhere. Many people never start things because they are afraid it's sucking at first, but I'm definitely not afraid, because I know in a few years we're all going to laugh and smile together at how far this podcast has come. If you don't already know, podcasting is very time consuming if you do everything on your own, which I do, and can quickly become expensive to produce. So I'm trying to figure out how much I can afford right now. The best thing you can do to help make it easier for me to invest in this podcast is by simply supporting it by subscribing, reviewing it, commenting, and spreading the word to the people around you, because we all know that metrics matter most to potential sponsors and investors. Until next February, I want you all listening to have zero expectations from me and More Than an Admin. Keep checking in, because you never know when and what I'm going to drop, but let yourself be surprised, and I hope to still have your continued support. I'll never forget my first conversation with Libby Moore, Oprah's former chief of staff, who told me about when she left her job with Oprah, she decided to go on the Libby Moore Gypsy Tour, where she went off the grid on a road trip for a year, and how many people questioned why she'd do that because people might forget about her. And despite what anyone said, she did it anyway and had no regrets. Her story and courage has always stuck with me. If there's anything I've learned in the last year, it's that you will find out who your real friends are and who truly supports you when you leave somewhere or when you have to go MIA to take care of yourself. It's no secret that I had to take a huge break in the last year from this podcast, LinkedIn, speaking engagements, and many other commitments outside of Google, because I had to first take care of my health and fully focus on developing then executing my plan to leave Google. I've been taking copious mental notes, so I can't say enough about how much I appreciate all of those who have been there for me, who have spoken life back into me, and who have cared more about me as a human being than whatever I can do for them. I keep going because of each of you, and I can't wait to make y'all proud of what we're about to do together in the new year. A lot more is coming, so please stay tuned. It's about that time to start closing up this episode. I'm sure you want more details, but I hope this was a good starting point. If you're curious to learn more, please join John Kinsey and I on Instagram later today, November 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, which if you don't know my personal Instagram, it's at Mallory is More. We'll be discussing more about my decision, what I'm doing right now to make sure I'm setting myself up for success in the new year, and what it takes to close one chapter to open up another. I'm sure Dawn will also share some updates in her own life. And no, she's not quitting Google, so I don't want anyone to think that. And even if you can't join the live, check out the recording on my Instagram page later on. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and a special thank you for those who genuinely care about me and More Than an Admin, or just being nosy or being a hater, which I know some of y'all are out there. The genuine love and support I do get as I take this crazy leap of faith to fulfill God's purpose for me means the world to me. I don't take it for granted, and I'm going to prove you all right. I have one last request to all of my fellow Christians out there. I ask that you add me and More Than an Admin to your prayer list for the next few months, because we all know when you're about to step into God's purpose for you and glorify Him on a greater platform, the devil loves to come in and try to distract you. I mean, even just to try to get this podcast out, I'm telling you, I've had so many sound quality issues. I've had so many editing issues. I don't know what was going on. The devil did not want this podcast going out, but it's finally out. And I know it's not perfect, but it's out there. So I just ask that you please pray for my health and mental fortitude to be able to push through any challenges that might come my way. And please pray that God will continue to use me and More Than an Admin to influence the world while glorifying God at the same time. We all know prayer is powerful. And if you need me to pray for anything for you or for others in your life, please DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I want to pray for you too. Thank you all so much, and I promise this is only the beginning. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the More Than an Admin podcast. Make sure you have subscribed, and if you're feeling a little generous, please also leave a review because we love your feedback. And remember to share this podcast with those around you. If you're looking for more content, check out morethananadmin.com, our YouTube channel, or follow us at More Than an Admin on all platforms. If you're looking to connect directly with me, you can find me at Mallory is More on all platforms or search for me on LinkedIn. Let's continue together to influence how the world views administrative professionals and help admins embrace all aspects of their identity to become their best selves. Remember, you are more than your job title, and the best is still yet to come. I'll talk with you soon.